Okay, so now we're going to get into a bit more complicated operations. Um, the first one is kind of how to uh, more efficiently stretch images. So as you can see, when you're adding an image that doesn't have the right aspect ratio um, to my flashcard generator, it's literally just taking the whole image and stretching it. Um, which, as you can see, even at a small, that's less than 20% off, the aspect ratio starts to look kind of bad. Um, and there are a couple of techniques that you can use to make uh, make it look more natural. Um, one technique is to stretch parts of the image, but not other parts. So, for instance, you can see this is the original on the left, and this is my fully finished version on the right. There are a few other changes that I made other than just stretching his head, but one thing that I did do was to only stretch his head, actually specifically the top of his head, um, because that's a lot less noticeable than, say, stretching his face would be. So if you stretch cat, if you stretch the entire head, let's say 20%, I think I there we go. So it, oh sorry, shorten it 20%. Um, you can see his face winds up looking pretty weird. Um, I guess not that it's normal in the first place, but it's pretty noticeable. Like you can definitely tell that that face has been stretched, even if you haven't seen the original image. Whereas if you only take the top part of his head and stretch that, sorry, I keep forgetting you have to hit enter after you change the number before you tell it to scale. Um, that is a whole lot less noticeable. Obviously, once you've moved it down. There's still a little line there. There we go. That's a whole lot less noticeable. Um, one thing that you should keep an eye out for, though, is if you, it's more noticeable if you zoom in. Some people can notice it even if you're zoomed out. But if you zoom in, I actually didn't do the best job here either, but um, there's actually kind of a seam there. So what you want to do is take the smudge tool, and probably can be a little bit smaller. Yeah. Just take the smudge tool and just smudge it a little bit. Doesn't need much. You don't want to do it too much or it becomes really noticeable that it's kind of been smoothed out. But just a little bit to smudge it to cover up that seam, and it's a lot less noticeable that you've done some editing there. Obviously, you would take a bit more time to do it than doing in this kind of short tutorial, but once you're fully zoomed out, it's really hard to tell on my finished image over here that it's been done. I think that I actually did squish it a bit more than 20%, maybe 25% there. But that's one technique that you can use. And we'll actually come back to this image in a little bit to show you some of the other stuff that I did to it, but I want to try and keep this video on kind of one topic of how to apply kind of localized aspect ratio changes in order to make the image look better than if you just squish the whole thing. This is another good example. So this is the image that I used for the Great Wall. This is the original here, which is obviously way too wide. And I did crop it a little bit. You can see I cropped off this area over here up to the edge of the Great Wall. And I believe I also cropped, this kind of foreground part of the wall off so that it ends right about here. So I did crop it a little bit, and that helps. But even with the cropping, it's still far too wide. And I think I cropped a little bit off the sky as well, but that's fine. So if you just squish the entire image, I think that's something like 60-ish? No. Yeah, 80 looks about right. Yeah, it's a little bit off, but that's a fairly good idea. Again, you can notice that it looks noticeably a little bit squished. So instead of squishing the whole picture, what you can do is there's a little bit of a visual illusion. You might have noticed it a little bit when I squished his head. So to show it again real quick. When something gets squished, it tends to enhance the appearance of depth. So looking at his face when it's been squished versus his face when it's not squished, particularly like the bottom part of his face and like his chin, do you see how it kind of looks like he's tilting his head forward more? So like tilting his forehead forward and tilting his chin back. That's kind of an optical illusion that when you squish something, it makes it appear further away, and kind of amplifies any sense of depth that the original image had. Whereas if you stretch something, it actually does the opposite. And makes it appear closer. So now it looks like his chin is further forward than it is in the original, and his tongue appears to be sticking out and down more than in the original, even though it's actually the same exact image, just stretched. So in a picture like this, it's really easy to use that to kind of hide the fact that you have stretched it. And the way that you can do that is basically the further away something is in the picture, the more you can stretch it. So you can come in here, or the more you can squish it, rather. You can come in here and squish this one, say only 10%. Oops. And a handy thing, so you could, when you're doing something like this, you could move it manually like I did with his head, but particularly, oh crap, I didn't select the whole thing. If you're selecting all the way up to the top and bottom, or all the way to the side, to the sides, then one trick that you can use is to use the Zealous crop. So you'll notice when I do that, it will fill in a background color. And the Zealous crop works just like the crop or the trim that I showed you earlier on the website, except that it's a bit smarter. And it will actually search the entire image for any horizontal or vertical lines of pixels that are the same color and remove those. So now when I auto crop this, when I Zealous crop this, it's going to remove this black band, which was created because I shrunk that part of the image. This is a pretty high resolution image. It's almost 5,000 pixels by 2,500 pixels. So it's going to take, even on my computer, it's going to take a minute or two to, there we go, to finish. But that's easier than trying to manually kind of move it around to close up the seams. So we've done the furthest away, and now we can go to kind of a middle ground and squish that another 10%. And what this is doing is it means that the first section that we squished is actually getting squished a second time. So now that area has been squished roughly 20%, while the middle area has been squished about 10%, and the stuff to the right of it hasn't been squished at all. And again, we can come in Zealous crop. You could actually wait on the Zealous cropping and do it just once at the end. But I want to do it as we go so you can kind of see how it looks as you squish individual regions. Now you'll notice one thing that I'm doing is you want to try and aim your borders such that they can kind of be hidden by a significant change in the image itself. So for the first section, I lined it up with this little krenel, because not only is that a nice straight line, which kind of hides the fact that we've done some mischief in there, but also that is a big foreground image over the background image behind it, because the wall kind of wraps around here. And I've done the same thing here where I lined up this region with this krenel, because it's a nice big solid line that hides it, and also the krenels are larger objects, so they tend to draw attention towards them and away from other stuff around them. And then we can do a third section where we unfortunately don't have any straight lines, but we do have this kind of transition point, which is kind of a good place to aim it. That would be another decent location because that's where the rock face is, but I'd rather take the hit at this interface. missed. Yeah, I missed a line of pixels up there. Normally I would undo it and redo the operation, but just for this short demo, it's fine to just delete it out. And here we wind up with something very similar to the original image that I did. And again, it's much harder to tell with something like this versus simply squishing the whole thing, because of the effect of the depth perception and the fact that something in the foreground here is going to be a lot more noticeable that it's been squished than something smaller and further away. So that is a couple of ways that you can either locally or kind of in stages by region scale the image to hide the fact that you've made changes to the aspect ratio.